makes it such a fun thing. And deep down, we may say that, yeah, we're peaceful people. We don't like seeing people fight. But when it comes to Formula One, trust me, it is so much fun. And in 2021, there are going to be so many of these driver rivalries. And today, on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium, we thought that we should speak about this. And knowing our fascination to turn should do's into will do's, here we are today speaking about the driver rivalries to look out for in 2021. And what a fun session it should be. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Inside Line F1 podcast live. My name is Soumil Arora. And as always, see, I've said it once today. I'm going to start the counter to say how many times I say as always. But I'm joined by Kunal Shah. And for all of you who don't know Kunal, which I'm sure you will know at this stage, but ex-racing driver, ex-yacht sailor, he is ex-marketing head of Force India, currently working as motorsport consultant of the VS Sport Network. And I say this every time, but I still have to, among other things. Kunal, how's it going?
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Soumil. It is going really well. I think the next time you introduce me, I'm going to just put my camera off. I don't know where to look sometimes. But thanks. It's great to be back live. And we've got a special guest for the show today. I'd love to introduce Bharat Sharma, who's the Chief Sports Correspondent for the Press Trust of India. Now, that's his official title. Okay. But the unofficial title that, that's given to him in the social circles. Okay. And if I may say this, Bharat, he's Bernie Ecclestone's friend in the Indian media, right? He's managed to pull out some of the most amazing quotes from Bernie in the last several years. So thanks for joining us, Bharat. It's lovely to have you.
Yeah, pleasure is all mine. Lovely to be here. And I was Bernie's friend. Sadly, things have taken a U-turn. So, but
there's a higher chance.
It was fun while it lasted. Yeah, it was fun.
There's a higher chance you'll be friends with Stefano and Chase Carey than the two of us here.
Yeah. For that, you need to have an Indian GP to get that kind of access and rapport building. So probably we are looking at, I don't know if there'll be an Indian GP ever. So let's see. Yeah.
True.
I mean, that's just Bernie Ecclestone for you, right? Just the master political player at the end of the day.
Definitely. I still remember how he used to feed me information during the 2013 and 14 GP when there was this talk whether it might get cancelled or whether it'll be postponed. But I mean, it was always a pleasure to speak to him. I mean, it's always a soft-spoken guy. You really literally had to have your ears properly on to listen to him. But great guy. Did a lot for Formula One, but Formula One needed a change. So rightly so, it has moved on.
Exactly. The Bernie era really, it's hard to imagine what Formula One would be like today without Bernie Ecclestone. And one thing that was really prominent in the time of Bernie, when he actually became the head of Formula One, was the kind of rivalries we saw, right? One immediately springs to mind, Senna versus Prost. You had Mansell versus Piquet and the likes. It has transitioned on into the likes of Hamilton versus Vettel. But in the last couple of years, there haven't really been many of them because Hamilton really has been dominating. But there have been more rivalries simmering in down below. So let's actually start out with the first one for the World Championship rivalries, because of course that is the big prize that we're all looking for. But who do you think can challenge Lewis? Because there's always going to be Lewis right up there. Who's the main competitor? Is it Max, or finally is Bottas version 674 finally going to challenge him for the World Championship?
If you look at the last season, Max was almost on the heels with Bottas. So. Again, you should not go by the pre-testing results, and obviously 3 days of pre-season testing. But yeah, you'd have to say Max. The car looks good. I mean, they didn't have any issues during the testing, and obviously he's closer than ever to Lewis. So it'll be interesting to see, and obviously there'll be other battles also to look forward to. Hopefully, he's able to get that deserving title this year. It seems all is falling into place for Red Bull and Max. So let's see. We need a new champion anyway. So
we do. We've had not to discredit Lewis, but what has it been? 7 world championships. I think that's more than enough. But it's just testament to the man and the kind of effort he's put in. But speaking about Max, Kunal, the dream of the youngest ever Formula One world champion, which seemed to be very possible considering he came into the sport at 18. It seems to have faded away. But Honda have just brought on the A game seemingly, and it seems to be the case in testing as well. Do they have it in there? Because if they do, you kind of get a feeling like Max will definitely be on it.
At this stage between the first preseason test and the first race of the season, it is very hard to discard the chances of Max Verstappen and Red Bull Racing overall, because they had such a solid preseason test. Like you mentioned, Honda is bringing their A game. They've brought a new engine. The 2022 engine, like we've been saying, is being used this season. Also, the engine is far more compact than the predecessor engines and so on. So at this moment, it does seem very likely that we will have a Lewis versus Max battle for the championship. We never know what happens, the minute Mercedes literally pull out all their armory, in the qualifying sessions, and then sort of run away with things in the races. So, but that's credit to Mercedes, right? Even though they've had a bad preseason test, and bad by, of course, not the most obvious metrics, right? They had reliability gremlins and so on. Overall, it was pretty solid from the data that that showed up, but it's so hard to write them off, right? And at the same time, I think there is a lot of excitement about Checo Perez having
Yeah.
bolstered Red Bull Racing's chances in the championship. So to me, I'd love to see how these four drivers fight it out. We'll have we've never seen a Perez versus Hamilton, for example, or
Exactly.
or a Perez versus Bottas. Of course, we saw it. We saw that when Bottas was racing for Williams at back in point. But I think Perez will be the one, or is at the moment the one unknown factor when it comes to the top four drivers battling it out.
Actually, about Perez, it's going to be very interesting, right? We've never ever seen Sergio Perez in this capacity in a race-winning car as such. Now that he's finally got in there, there's always this question of, oh, how do you be Max Verstappen's teammate? This should be a fun driver rivalry. Where do you think this one swings?
In fact, this is probably I'm looking forward to the most, because if you look back at Perez's career, he has this uncanny ability to land podiums out of nowhere, whether it was at Sauber, whether it was at Force India, even the extreme circumstances. He's someone you can bank upon. So this is obviously the big season for him, though he's already kind of underplayed it so far, that he's getting used to the car and the seat and just how things work at RBR. So uh, I expect it to be a tough battle, but again, whether the two drivers get equal treatment, because again, Daniel was also a high profile driver when he was around at RBR. So Perez comes in now. So whether they get equal treatment, and if they do get equal treatment, whether and considering both are competing for the championship, for example, it's a potential situation, how would the team react and how would Max react? Because Max is not used to having an equal partner in the team. I mean, the last two seasons, I mean, Alex was
Yeah.
obviously the clear number two. So again, I would love to see Max becoming the world champion, but I would like to see how he handles himself mentally, because there are still doubts there, though obviously he has grown as a driver.
Kunal, this brings up a very tricky question. We wouldn't know at this stage because we've never even seen them in equal machinery. But is Sergio Perez genuinely an equal to Max Verstappen? I know it's hard to quantify where Formula One drivers rank in terms of talent, and Sergio definitely will be Max's biggest challenge since Daniel. But where does this one go? It seems to be like the most psychological of the battles that we're going to have in 2021.
It is. And, I think the answer will be with us in 10 years when AWS will run a machine learning algorithm to tell us how Perez stacked up against Max Verstappen and the likes. But, in all honesty, the big difference between Gasly, Albon, and Ricardo being partners with Max, and now Checo being partners with Max, the big difference is that the latter three, or they were needing to prove themselves in the Red Bull scenery. They needed to stack up against Max Verstappen from day one. But Perez, coming from the outside, has proven himself, and there's a reason why we're all singing praises of him and like Bharat pointed out, this uncanny ability to deliver podiums,
Exactly.
in underperforming cars or cars not deserving to be on podiums, right? So it's going to be a very interesting battle that's going to pan out. We may not see all of it up front immediately, while Perez settles in. But yes, seeing how Max is able to handle such a challenge will be very, very interesting. Yes, he's handled Daniel Ricciardo extremely well, I would say, so much so that he was successful in getting Red Bull to back him and sort of be okay with letting Ricciardo go and the likes. Yes, this is going to be a fun battle, with the Mercedes drivers and internally to follow at Red Bull Racing.
From one internal battle, let's move on to another one. There are going to be a few of them, but we shall focus more on intra-team battles as well. But this one is the one that's been going on for the last, what, 3, 4 odd years. But Bottas seems to reinvent himself every year at the start of the season, right? You get a feeling that, oh, it's Valtteri Bottas version 3, version 4, version 5, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And a couple of wins follow, but nothing major after that. Do you think 2021 is finally the year? He seems more dedicated than ever, which seems to be the case every year. But what's your take on this big battle that could define the World Championship?
You asking about the battle between Lewis and Bottas?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I think it's gonna be a one-sided affair, like the past seasons, because he will get you those couple of wins or three, but then I don't see him challenging Lewis at all. In fact, if you look at his time at Mercedes, in the initial years, he was a lot more competitive than compared to the last couple of years. He's been kind of uh, fallen behind in terms of his performances, but again, to compete against Lewis is also, I mean, that trust is
Exactly.
always there. So again, like I said, I expect Lewis and Max battle to be a lot more closer. I'll be surprised if Bottas gets another season at Mercedes after this.
Exactly.
Ah,
Huh. Actually,
that's
yeah.
interesting.
Actually, speaking of which, Kunal, I have a small question
Mm.
for you. Now, stability is fine. It's all nice and well to have a driver that won't really challenge your main driver. So it gives them a very good environment to just dominate, right? To be the best version of themselves, like a Michael Schumacher and a Barrichello. But somewhere down the line, do you think Mercedes will be thinking at the end of this year, if Hamilton continues, that is, and you know what, we actually need two alphas in the team finally. Why don't we get a George Russell in and just pit them up against each other? What's it for us to lose? At the end of the day, we already may have the best car. Why not see how it goes? I know it's more on the entertainment value. We have more to gain from it than Mercedes, but still.
It may well happen. They had two alpha drivers without knowing it in Rosberg and Hamilton, right? So at the end of the day, it's something very possible. It will also be something we would really all look forward to, like letting two different generations of drivers battle it out. That's something we've sort of missed in this generation. Of course, it's happened several times before that. You miss out such a lovely battle. But if that happens, it's going to be box office. It's going to be box office for Formula One and for all of
Oh yeah,
us.
absolutely. Should be very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's let's actually change the thing a bit. Let's actually go down the grid. But one very interesting thing that we all should be watching out for are the new drivers.
Yeah.
And Mick Schumacher is one of the biggest names to come out here, right? Formula 2 world champion. And it's going to be interesting because Haas this year, at least from testing, it seems that they have the worst possible car.
Yes.
But there could be a lot to prove. We've got Mick Schumacher in the Haas, and there's George Russell in the Williams, ex Formula 2 world champion himself. A bit of a half unproven commodity of sorts because we saw exactly what he could do, but never in a very representative situation. If you had to pick between these two folks, where would you go in that dimension?
Well, I see both the drivers of both these teams finishing in the bottom because obviously Williams and
Exactly, yeah.
Haas, it's very clear from testing and obviously from previous seasons also that they're not going to improve much further. But again, Mick Schumacher in Formula One, the biggest surname in Formula One, is obviously good for the sport, and there's a lot of curiosity that way. But then, uh, team Gunther has already said that
Exactly.
they're not actually. gonna update their car going forward, and they're already looking at 2022. So uh, you expect a tough season for Mick and Nikita. Obviously, they will be competing amongst themselves
Exactly.
in their own battle. So in that battle, I see Mick beating Nikita hands down. I mean, I see him winning that battle easily. But yeah, overall, it could be a frustrating year for Mick because given the expectations and given the hype around it, it certainly won't be as good as his father's debut season, where he actually got, uh, I mean, a couple of good finishes, and I remember his best finish was I think fifth
Yeah.
in 1992 with Benetton. So uh, I people will compare. Obviously, people will talk about it. There'll be 24/7 scrutiny, but then don't expect miracles.
That's an excellent point. Where do you think this one goes, Kunal?
I'm excited to see Mick Schumacher battle against George Russell. That's, like Bharat pointed out, seemingly both these teams are going to be at the bottom of the grid. But so what do you do when you're stuck in a car at the bottom of the grid, right? That's the question that Mick would be asking himself, and all of us would be asking as well. And the best example for Mick, for in all honesty, would be to follow what George Russell has done.
Hmm.
Every half a chance, whether it's in qualifying, whether it's in race, he's literally just grabbed it with both hands and his steering wheel and driven the wheels of that car to impress us. And George Russell's impressed us all to such a level that suddenly we are absolutely okay with talking about him being a replacement to a Formula One legend that's currently racing at Mercedes, right?
Exactly.
So it's not just the talent, it's the sentiment that George Russell brings, which we are all subscribing to. And that's sort of going to be very exciting to see if Mick is able to evoke such a sentiment. Of course, given his, famous last name, he anyway does evoke a lot of sentiment. So that said, I'd love to see how Mick stacks up against George, if they are, in a half decent chance to sort of battle with each other, and how it all grows. And another thing that sort of stuck with Mick is this, whole thing about him being a slow learner,
Hmm.
right? Because he sort of spent 2 seasons in every junior Formula. It's something that's just stuck with him, and it's. I don't know if it's going to be entirely true, or it's just something that's made up because of the duration he spent, but how quickly Mick adapts to Formula One, to the car, to the circumstances, to not being able to fight with the majority of the battle, and so on, will also be something to look out for. But most definitely, I think Schumacher versus Russell, Schumacher versus maybe even Raikkonen. That could be a storyline that could come up for all of us. And I think we've almost pretty much written off Schumacher versus in Mazepin.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very interesting thing, right? We've just had Kaushik come up in our YouTube chat and say Raikkonen and Giovinazzi are both alpha drivers. They could very well be in the fight as well. Who knows? It's that lower midfield battle, right? Should be very interesting. But uh, it's one thing that's really been on my mind about Alfa Romeo, and we've discussed this constantly in Pits to Podium's other podcast shows as well. It's that it's all a case of stability, and a lot of it is dependent on Ferrari. But Ferrari are just such a curious case, right? They seem to be in a whole hot mess of their own. What do you think about them? I mean, they have an internal battle of their own, but they're also trying to compete against the likes of Alpine and then Aston Martin. This, I think, has to be the best inter-team battle of them all. I think this is going to be incredible.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I also read the Ferrari was saying that they're finally satisfied with their straight line speed, but again,
Ah,
it doesn't guarantee them success or race wins in the coming season. But yeah, like you said, Charles and Carlos, again, well established drivers by now. It's going to be another tough battle, very much like Max and Perez. Who's going to beat who? Time will tell. But I see Charles pipping Carlos at least in the first season because obviously he's been around
yeah.
for a couple of seasons and he knows the team and he know how it's done. But having said that, you cannot ignore Carlos at all. And obviously he had a very good last season. He's again a reliable guy. He's very solid. So again, expect fireworks there also, but I expect Charles to pip him at least for the first season.
Your thoughts, Kunal?
I was on one of the WhatsApp chats. I read something very interesting that somebody came up with,
Uh-huh.
that the hashtag that Ferrari should use for their drivers in 2021 should be Charlos, right?
Charlos.
So
Charlos.
all the fan driven humor. But yeah, talking about Ferrari, I think it's always interesting to see how Charles stacks up against different drivers. I think that's what we're all looking forward to. He did really good at Alfa Romeo back in time. It was Marcus Ericsson, and we all thought, okay, that's not the best benchmark he could get. No offense, Marcus, but he came up against Vettel, and he's done really well. Carlos Sainz, a seasoned campaigner now, former Red Bull Junior, did really well at McLaren. So will be interesting to see how it all pans out. And I'm looking forward to seeing if Carlos Sainz gets the Kimi Raikkonen treatment at Ferrari. The number 2 driver treatment, because
Ferrari
Ferrari
is
have
famous for that, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
infamous
and
for that, yeah.
so and Ferrari have been very open, saying, okay, Carlos, Charles is going to be the team leader, right? So exciting times for that. But overall, in general, I'm excited for the midfield battle overall, because we're going to have a Fernando Alonso versus a Sebastian Vettel, and we've not seen them battle since the 2010s and 2012s and so on, right?
Yes.
Since Red Bull Ferrari, were the battles when they had. To add to this mix, it's going to be Daniel Ricciardo in McLaren. And let's remember, he had a solid preseason test as well. It's McLaren Mercedes from this season, right? And to this mix, like I said, we add the Ferrari drivers. And at this moment, I haven't even brought in the talented likes of Norris and Ocon and so on. But I think Alonso versus Leclerc versus Vettel versus Ricciardo, I'm just picking like the team leaders, so to say, is going to be absolutely bonkers for the mid-season.
Kunal, you didn't say Lance Stroll. I'm disappointed. Come on.
My apologies.
He looks better prepared right now than Vettel, so yeah, you never know.
Exactly. Also, Bharat, we can actually discuss this point in depth, because Kunal said on the Inside Line F1 podcast, and it's a wonderful thing to think about, considering Vettel's current run of form. Now, we can't speak about testing, right? It's not very representative.
Yes.
But from the looks of things, there could be a side school of thought which may say that Aston Martin has brought Vettel in perhaps to make Stroll look stronger. I mean, that's considering 2020 form, that is. Vettel just wasn't on the pace at all. Could Stroll very well be the team leader? Who knows? Because let's be honest, he's not slow in any means whatsoever. Privileged, definitely on the route to Formula One,
Yes.
but he's a good driver in itself.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good driver unless you can't have a pole position in Formula One. That is what there. But again, being his background comes in the way of his career time and again, and he has to live with that. But last year he showed what he can do in a car, and since he's been with the team for a while now, compared to Vettel, it's a brand new season for him with a brand new team. Unlike Alonso, who was involved with Alpine last year and obviously involved with the development of the car. It's not the same with Vettel. So pressure is obviously will be there on Vettel, because for a long time it seemed that he might not be in Formula One at all post
Yeah.
2020. So he managed to find a seat uh, with the team that is coming back into Formula One. The expectations will always be there from a 4-time world champion. He's not had the best of starts. If you talk about his preseason experience, so right now things are in favor of Lance. I mean, he's definitely ahead for the first race, but again, you never rule out a 4-time world champion, right? So you expect Vettel to give his best and be there, challenging for podiums once in a while, and obviously being uh, the best driver among the mixed midfield teams, which is going to be very, very close, like Kunal said.
Exactly. Also, Kaushik has come up with a lovely, lovely point on our YouTube chat. Shout out to him. He said Alpha Tauri are going to be in this mix too. It's going to be fun seeing someone like a Yuki coming up against an Alonso in a midfield battle. Youth versus experience. Huh. What do we think about that, gentlemen? Kunal, why
I
don't you go
think
first?
I think it's great. One is a Honda prodigy and the other one is a Honda reject. So it's gonna be a battle for all of us to follow. But that is one thing I've listed down: Yuki Tsunoda versus Pierre Gasly. That's the first environment that he'll be within, because Pierre is a Red Bull Racing discard, right? Uh, Again, it's not the best of tags to carry around, but that's the reality. He also didn't get the call up again. When Albon was dropped, they had to bring in Checo Perez. So another clear signal that, hey, you're good, mate, but we're going to try and see if somebody else is better, right?
Hmm.
And to this mix, now there is Yuki Tsunoda, who comes with a lot of positive momentum, right? Uh, could Yuki be the next Max Verstappen in the Red Bull Racing camp? That's literally the the benchmark that he's going to sort of be compared against, because that's what Red Bull is also looking for. The next Max Verstappen, should Max leave. So how Yuki stacks up against Pierre will be very, very interesting. And yes, Alpha Tauri, if they end up using their DRS only in the DRS zones, I think they will be just slower than the uber competitive midfield. But to see Yuki go up against the likes of Alonso or Ricardo, or even the two Ferrari drivers, will be absolutely fascinating for us.
I want to actually draw an IPL analogy for Yuki. He's
Uh,
one of our fearless guys from Mumbai Indians, the likes of Surya Kumar Yadav and Ishan
yes.
Kishan, completely fearless. So from Formula 4 to Formula 1 in what, 3 or 4 years? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
Yes.
It's been quite a rise for him, and he's just got nothing to lose, and I'm sure he's going to drive like that. He was super, super impressive in Formula 2 last year. Every time I think about Yuki, obviously I'm thinking about Jihan, because obviously I'd rather have him there in Formula 1 than Yuki, but then the deserving guy is there, and he's going to be a, a very tough opponent to Pierre. And uh, if you go by preseason, if at all we should, Alpha Tauri looks good. If not as good as Red Bull, but they look very competitive. So expect a race win like last year. They've always been a solid team. If you look at their performance over the last 2 3 seasons, they've been improving gradually, and credit to Red Bull for that, because they've nurtured their B team also very, very well.
That's a lovely point that you mentioned there about the IPL analogy. So it just brings into mind maybe the likes of an Ishan Kishan. He's also short like Yuki, has a lot of firepower in him. Or maybe if you're a football fan, the likes of Lorenzo Insigne, 5'4", but man, what a player he is. Yuki Tsunoda is the real deal. I think he's going to be very, very exciting to watch out for this year. And that battle between Alpha Tauri, right? And they're constantly pushing above their weight. It's going to be fun to see what Yuki Tsunoda is going to do against now. And I feel so good saying this, a past Grand Prix winner. It's going to be so nice to see. That's Pierre Gasly for you. But now, this is one battle that I'm very curious to see. Now, McLaren have had a bit of a restructuring of sorts. They have been a completely new team. Bharat, Kunal mentioned last time while we were on the live stream that McLaren finally has drivers that they wanted themselves for a very, very long time. Now, Ricciardo versus Norris, all the Twitch fans and all the people connected on social media, they're pretty much divided, right? Because these are the two biggest fan favorites you could possibly have.
Yes.
So, who do you go for? It's like, do you go for a Dhoni or a Kohli? It's just two different split sides altogether. Who's your pick in this big battle?
Well, as a pairing, they're really good for their team. PR wise, they're really good for the sport. And but when they go on the track, they are fierce competitors. I'll have to pick Daniel because obviously he's been around for almost a decade now. Lando has also grown. I think it'll be his third season in Formula One, so he's also a lot more matured. But with Daniel, if you go back, I remember the first ever Indian Grand Prix. Narain had replaced him for the only race post the mid-season
Hmm.
because Daniel had replaced him, and he had told me clearly that Bharat, this guy is going to be world champion one day, and this was back in 2011. He's obviously underperformed on that front. Maybe has taken the wrong steps also. Uh, maybe this could be his year. McLaren is doing well on the rise. maybe they'll probably knock on the doors of Red Bull, and finally they have the package that they need. So Daniel for sure, but then it doesn't mean that Lando will be an easy pushover. They will kind of uh, compete with each other tough, but
Yeah.
Daniel should win the battle hands down because obviously he's just too experienced. And even if you look at his time with Red Bull, this was only one season in 2018. I remember that he lost to Max. Otherwise, he had beaten Max the couple of seasons before in 16 and 17, if I'm not wrong. So again, Renault didn't work out for Daniel. He'd be banking on McLaren for the world title that a lot of people think he is deserving of. So let's see how this marriage works. But yeah, Daniel ahead of Lando for sure. With due respect to Lando.
Your thoughts, Kunal?
Bharat said something very interesting, especially quoting Naren on this, right? And this is the beauty of all the experience that Bharat brings from the world of motorsport reporting over the years, right? So thanks for sharing that, Bharat. But
Absolutely.
yes, Daniel has not won a world championship, right? And we all know that winning a world championship in Formula One, is much more than luck. It's much more than your talent. It's about being in the right car at the right time, literally
Yeah.
speaking, right?
Yeah.
And then also having the right teammate at the right time, because if it was Valtteri Bottas versus Nico Rosberg, for example, who knows? Maybe Rosberg would have won a couple of titles again. Sorry, Bottas could have won a couple of titles, right? So just to put Ricardo's career into perspective, is maybe he switched gears into being like, okay, I cannot win a world title with a Renault and with a McLaren. The only thing I can do is keep reminding people again and again about my world championship potential and my talent. And
Mm.
with that in mind, I love how we are all so so tilting towards Ricardo, despite Norris being in his third season with McLaren in Formula One, right? But that's just the talent and the might that Daniel Ricciardo brings with himself, irrespective of whichever team he races for. And to me, McLaren have the strongest driver pairing, most equal driver pairing, I would say.
Hmm.
In the 2 seasons that Lando Norris was with Carlos Sainz, Norris was able to hold his ground completely, right? And to be able to hold ground against Ricardo will also do phenomenally well for Lando Norris's career in Formula One, because he's a young driver. He's also looking for a world title. He knows it may not come with McLaren. He doesn't know where he
Exactly.
could be racing next. So it's going to be a very, very fascinating inter-team battle, I would say, because to me, these two drivers are more equal than some of the other pairings, say at Alpine, or say at Aston Martin, or maybe even say at Ferrari, I would say.
Mm. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Should be fun to see what happens at McLaren. But finally, any battles that you had in mind? I was quite keen to see what Mazepin quite can do. I mean, we all have just really put him down so far. Maybe he can prove us wrong by the driving side of things at least. That should be interesting. Any other battles that you have in mind before we conclude?
Oh, well, the another thing I look forward to is like Kunal touched upon in the midfield, Fernando and Vettel, and just
Oh yeah.
Fernando's comeback. Uh, Luckily, he's recovered from his cycling accident, and he had a very issue-free pre-season testing also. And I expect the way Fernando is. I remember the days at McLaren Honda, and it was a disaster season, but he could still get something out of the car. So obviously, compared to that, Alpine is kind of much stronger outfit, growing every year. Still not there where it should be. Still in the midfield. So yeah, expect Fernando to really give us more joy like he has in the past. And I hope he gets a good car, and I hope he keeps going in Formula One because the sport definitely needs him as his undisputed rare talent.
Exactly. I mean, knowing Fernando Alonso, you just know, right? He's going to come up with so many mind-boggling performances that they've just turned out to be normal at this stage. That's just the genius of Fernando. Kunal, any other
Yeah.
battles that you had in mind? Finally,
Yes, I mean it's Fernando Alonso, of course. You put him on whatever you put him in, he's the quickest guy around, right? And
Yeah,
I'd love to see how he stacks up against Vettel. They have unsettled rivalries from several years ago, but you spoke about Mazepin, Sommel, right?
yeah.
I think I think the rivalry that Mazepin will not end up winning, or the battle that Mazepin will not end up winning, will be the one he has, versus Formula One. So it's Mazepin versus
Yeah.
all of Formula One. That's the sort of sentiment he's going up against, right? And despite all his, mental strength and all his training and so on, I don't see how he can be any less welcome or more welcome, depending how you see it, than he currently has been. So that is going to be something to look out for. Seemingly, Mazepin's going to be around for a while, so I'd love to see how he's able to bring a change in this sentiment that pretty much every fan in the Formula One world who's not Russian feels this way about Mazepin racing in Formula One this season.
Exactly. Well, all the social issues aside, I just hope that he can just deliver for Haas, because that team is struggling, and you don't really like to see anyone struggling so badly, right? So I hope he's really good on the driving front. At least from what we've seen, he can do a pretty decent job. And while we're at it, we can just speak about the battle. This one is going to be very interesting, right? It's just going to be Haas versus Survival. But jokes aside, or even maybe Drive to Survive versus showing Formula One objectively, that's never going to happen.
But
The
Somin, I have to say, Mazepin has already delivered for Haas. He's delivered all the potloads of money that
Oh,
Haas
the
needs. So
Netflix as well. He's going to deliver on that side, that's for sure.
yes, so it's all the money and all the
Oh, the
off-track
new season is
content.
out, right?
Yeah.
Yesterday. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Can't wait to see what happens. Meanwhile, folks, if you enjoyed this episode, you know exactly what to do. Show notes are down below. If you want to subscribe, and I certainly hope you do, you can do that down below. Leave us a like. Leave any constructive comments if you have so. Anything that we can work on, anything that we can discuss in a future episode, definitely feel free to. And also check out our future and past content as well. There's going to be a lot more stuff coming up. And Bharat, generally, thank you so much for joining us. That was a really fun episode today.
Yeah, pleasure all mine. Before I go, I have one question to ask
Definitely.
both of you. Since normally I'm in the business of asking questions and not answering, so what do you think about Mercedes? I mean, considering the 3 day of preseason testing,
Mm.
unprecedented times, no, in a normal scenario they could sandbag, right? But would they sandbag in a tight window like this?
That's a good one. That's a good one. Actually, Kunal, why don't you go first?
Okay, so I don't think any team would have necessarily sandbagged, and that's the beauty of a 3 day preseason test, I would say, because there is just the opportunities to run are so limited in itself, and the opportunities to run when the conditions are right are even more limited, I would say. So I wouldn't think that teams would have sandbagged per se, but the only thing that they would have done, and this is what they do all the time, is use different fuel settings, or rather fuel loads, and different power mode settings in their power units, and that's where you see a bit of a difference in their performances. But I don't believe any team could have afforded to sandbag over a 3 day preseason test.
I think I'll have to go for more or less the same. They don't really have the chance. And yes, simulator systems might be at their best at this stage, where you can pretty much run entire races. I mean, 3, 4 races at the same time on the dyno and still get the best results. I think Mercedes wouldn't quite do that. But knowing Mercedes, they had a bad test by their own
Yeah.
standards. You know they're going to be punching back heavily. That is going to be fun. It's just Mercedes, right? It's just the kind of aura that they carry. We've been pinned down to the ground. Fine, we'll punch you right on the jaw and take our eighth or ninth. I think that'll be. How many has it been? I'm starting to get confused now.
It is their eighth yet, Sommel. It's 2021, and it is their eighth. The question whether it will be their ninth can remain for next season, I guess, if they win it this year.
Hopefully, by the end of the year, we'll have a a new champion in the hybrid area. Badly
Yeah.
needed.
Badly needed. To put that into context, you
Yeah.
know how many champions we've had in the hybrid era, folks? Two. Rosberg and Hamilton. That is insane. But, folks, on that note, it is time to conclude for this session of the Inside Line F1 podcast live. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe. Please leave us a good review or whatever you're listening or whatever you're watching, depending on what format you're actually consuming this content in. And please feel free to comment, reach out to us. We'll definitely respond. If there's any constructive criticism, we're right here, open. And Bharat, once again, thank you so much for coming on. Real pleasure.
So nice to be here. So hope to chat with you guys soon.
Definitely. So, folks, see you then the next time out on another future episode on the Inside Line F1 podcast and on Pits to Podium. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
See you.
Hey, this one was nice.
We done?
Yes, we are done. But just don't close your browser till your upload is done. Although it'll be done in maybe. Yeah, you go. It's done.
Yeah. No, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
This is good fun.
Perfect.
Really enjoy this.
Yeah. How long was it? I think it was more than half.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about